Hi, my name is Shulin Patel. I'm from Duke University and also a grouper developer. In this section, I'm going to be talking about how you can manage multiple grouper deployments if you have multiple environments. And I'll be talking about how to perform upgrades. So first of all, with multiple deployments, you're probably likely to have multiple environments. So this may include a development environment, a test or a QA environment, and a production environment. And you are likely to also use multiple components of Grouper, which may include the daemon, the Grouper UI, web services, and the Grouper client. Since all of these components have configuration files, it can easily become difficult to manage all the configuration for each component for each environment. As of Grouper 2.1, there isn't a built-in way to make this easier, but you can follow some best practices to make it easier for yourself. After 2.1, we'll be making configuration management easier though. So here are some steps that you may want to take. It would probably be an advantage to try automating the build procedure for each component that you use for each environment. One way to do this would be to first of all store all of your non-environment specific configuration in the default configuration files that are used by the grouper components. This would include customizations that apply to all of your environments. So for instance, this may include properties that specify default privileges to assign to new groups, or it may include custom CSS and logos that you may use for the UIs. But then environment-specific settings can be saved somewhere else, such as a separate build properties file. This would likely include database connection settings with usernames and passwords, but this may also include email addresses, location of log directories, and the environment setting and grouper that specifies the environment name. Then you would create your own build script, for instance using Ant, that would build each of these components for each environment after merging the non-environment specific settings. Again, this is not included in 2.1, but if you're using 2.1, it may be beneficial for you to have a procedure like this to make it easier for yourself. It would also be a good idea to store your non-environment specific configuration files in a version control system. And if you would rather avoid keeping passwords in configuration files, Grouper provides a way to externalize them. You can basically have your passwords encrypted and stored in separate files, and then have the configuration simply point to those files. The University of Pennsylvania has taken an approach similar to the one described here. You can take a look at the Wikidoc linked from here for more details. They've also included the build scripts that they use. When there are new major or minor releases of Grouper, we include the upgrade procedures with the release notes. The upgrade procedures are specific to that release, so they are generally very easy to follow. Here are some steps that are typical in most of the upgrades. In this example, it's assumed that a schema change is needed, which is the case in most of our major and minor releases. Though we do avoid schema changes when there's just a new build of a release. So for instance, there wouldn't be a schema change between version 2.1.0 and 2.1.1, but there could be a schema change between version 2.1 and 2.2. So the upgrade procedure is to first start off by downloading the new versions of each component. You would then want to merge the new configuration files and jars with the ones you're currently using. There are probably a couple different approaches you can take. If your previous customizations were very minor, it may be easier just to start off with the new configuration and add your customizations to them. On the other hand, if you made many customizations, then it may be easier to see what configurations have been added or modified in the new release, and then add those to your files. Note that this has to be done on all the components, such as the API, the web services, the UI, and so forth. Also, we do keep track of the configuration and jar updates on the wiki and linked from the release notes, so you can see what updates have been made there. Once you're done merging, you would want to stop the grouper daemon and prevent updates from happening to your grouper registry. The grouper API has an option to switch to read-only mode that would make writes fail. This option may be of interest to you if you would like to avoid an outage on read operations during the upgrade. The next step is to start up GSH using the old API version and run the changelog job. This would basically clear the pending changelog entries in your registry in the temp changelog table so that you wouldn't have issues after the upgrade if there were changes to the temp changelog processing code. Next, you would want to back up your database. Grouper doesn't do this automatically, but it's still recommended. This would generally be done by your DBA by performing a database level backup, but it's also possible to run the XML export utility with the Grouper to perform a backup to an XML file. Next, using the new API version, you would run registry check option using GSH, which would determine what schema changes were made between the releases and produce an SQL file for you. You should review the SQL file to make sure it looks okay. The release note would have information about what to expect in that. If everything looks good, you would run the registry run SQL file option using GSH to execute the SQL file. It's not always the case, but it's possible that when there's a schema change, some data needs to be initialized in the grouper registry next. For instance, new columns or tables may be added that need to be populated. If that's the case, the release notes will tell you what to do next. It may be a matter of just running one or two additional scripts using GSH. Finally, after all that is done, you can start the grouper daemon again and deploy all of your grouper components as well with the upgraded configuration in jars. So that's all for this tutorial. Click on the quiz link in the video description to reinforce your knowledge of this topic. Here are some links you can visit for more information.